Welcome back, fellow patriots, to another episode of Patriots of the American Republic. We are here. It is the midterms, and we've got a lot of good stuff coming for you. First off, I want to get into how important today is, right? It's really, really important for us to get out there and vote. As Republicans, conservatives, we cannot afford to stay home. We cannot afford to think that we got this in the bag, so we got to get out there. Now, what I'd like to talk about in this episode is the strategy on the left. They've come up with something extremely weird. They really do enjoy fear-mongering. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to state that Democrats really do like to fear-monger. I mean, we have example over example of Democrats causing fear in the general public in more than one narrative. I mean, do you recall how they used fears about the recession with the previous administration to kind of generate this fear during the midterms back then in 2018, right? I remember having multiple conversations with different peoples about how the economy was heading into a recession, and there were no economic indicators to suggest that. But again, that's what they wanted to do. How about fear-mongering when it came to C-19? I mean, we saw, and in some cases we're still seeing it, right? But there was a huge amount of fear-mongering, right? The leftist media really did focus on people getting infected and death rate. I didn't see any coverage on people beating it naturally. I didn't see any coverage on survival rate coming from the leftist media. It was all fear, which led to a lot of draconian mandates and lockdowns and I mean a number of different things that we still can't talk about, or we're slowly starting to talk about moving forward, right? What about when the left started talking about World War III and how Trump was going to start World War III because he was engaging back and forth with Kim Jong-un and he was calling him Rocket Man and so on and so forth. A lot of fear-mongering there. And what took place? In actuality, they were able to come to the table. Trump went to the DMZ and made history there. And so, I mean, the left just is full of fear-mongering when it comes to these types of things. Now, in all fairness, the right does the same thing, but I think it depends on your perspective, what we're talking about, and is there validity to the claim. For example, there's a lot of talks about World War III happening right now with things that are happening over with Russia, Ukraine, China, etc. Right now, let's look at those details a little bit closer. Is Russia currently invading another country? Yes. Has Russia threatened the world with nuclear assault? Yes. Is China a superpower? Have they threatened invasion, or have they thought about it, or have they publicly displayed their invasion of Taiwan? I think it's no secret that they have. I think they've also announced how they're looking to supersede us in more than one way. So again, is it hyperbolic to state those types of things? It all depends on your perspective. But when the threat is actually real, it's caution, right? But to be quite frank, is the right doing that to gain your vote, or are we doing it to sound the alarm and say, hey, we need to switch policies here because this is getting dangerous? Again, it depends on your perspective, how you're looking at it. Are you going deep underneath the root cause or the root issues and so on and so forth, right? But it's very clear during the midterms how the Democrats are definitely doing this to gin up their base, scare their base to going out there and voting for the midterms, and really doing a disservice, right? Because the most recent tactic that they're using is they're talking about how democracy is on the ballot. We've had several Democrats come out and fearmonger and talk about how democracy is on the ballot. If you do not vote for them, then democracy is gone. You're essentially going to be in a communistic Nazi world illusion. I honestly don't understand it, because we've talked about it in previous episodes, the differences between the right and the left currently in this political climate. And the comparisons are night and day. I mean, the Democratic Party has shifted so much. They are a shadow of what they were in the JFK eras. And heck, looking back, I mean, I wasn't born in that time, but looking back, during JFK, but looking back to the Bill Clinton era of Democrats, there's a huge swing between where they were then and where they're at now. So I don't think we can really make Democratic comparisons to the party between then and now. They're just worlds apart. But let's go ahead and get into our first video. Let's take a look at some prominent Democrats, doing this fear mongering.
Hours away from Election Day. Oh, forget that. I'm counting it down. It's about 750 minutes when voters will begin casting their ballots and determine the direction of our nation. Control of the Senate now hinges on a handful of neck-and-neck races across the country, and Republican candidates are largely arguing that they have better solutions to inflation, crime, and the southern border crisis, while President Biden and many in the Democratic Party are warning voters that if they're not elected, it will be the end of democracy.
Americans believe our democracy is at risk, that our democracy is under threat.
Democracy itself is on the ballot. The stakes are high.
What was at stake tonight and this week was the fact whether we will be a democracy in the future, whether our children will be arrested and conceivably killed.
This country is on track to repeat what happened in Germany when it was the greatest democracy going.
You did say there, though, it could be the end of the world.
No, democracy will be ended. The world will continue to exist.
So I just want to pause right there for a second. I mean, it's unbelievable what they're doing. And this isn't anything new, right? Remember how they talked about Jim Crow era laws when we're talking about voter rights. I do recall, if I'm not mistaken, Al Gore fear-mongering, the Democrats talk about they're going to put y'all back in chains, right? Fear-mongering, saying that the Republicans, who are white supremacists, are going to put black people back in chains. It's absolutely disgusting, the rhetoric. Is there any wonder why we have political violence going on in today's day and age? The rhetoric that is coming out of these people is absolutely absurd. No, there is not going to be an end to democracy because, number one, we are doing we're practicing, right, our right, our constitutional right, based on the republic that we have of a democratic process of voting, right? So for them to do that, now I do get where they could come from, right? Because, for instance, if we look at Venezuela was a democracy up until Hugo Chavez took over. He won, from what I understand, he won his first election fair and square. But then after that, it was, he did a lot of manipulation, no longer fair. And it's why Venezuela is at where it's at now. Come Maduro, and it's pretty much the same thing. So on paper, they are still a democracy, but they're not. If you have the same type of shenanigans going on, and you have a dictatorship going on, and socialism, and so on and so forth, you can't really consider it a democracy, right? Even though they still have elections. China's another good example where they just had elections, right? And on paper, they're not a democracy. They're on paper they're a republic. They're not a communistic country, but we all know what they are, right? It's the word changes, right? It's like, what's the difference between a prostitute and an escort? It's basically the same thing, but because prostitution has such a negative connotation to it, right? Escort just seems much more, fancy and elegant, right? So that's why these people don't want to be associated with communism, because it's a dirty word. So they, for visual aspects or visual purpose, surface level purposes, they don't consider themselves communistic, right? Though the People's Republic of China. You see where I'm going with that? So it's absolutely disgusting that we're hearing this from former president, current president, and these media associates. Now, what I do want to touch on is why we're going against something that's really bad here. They're trying to paint that if Republicans take control, that it's the end of democracy, right? Okay, let's take a look at who's actually subverting the Constitution, right? Is the right censoring anybody right now, right? That's part of your freedom of speech, right? Is the right censoring anybody, right? We believe free speech. You want to say something, you say it. We don't agree. Of course, threats are excluded from that, right? We know that from Supreme Court rulings. So are we the ones working with big tech? I mean, there's been reports coming out recently where it's been confirmed that the government has been working with social media tech giants to cancel certain people who are speaking certain topics, things involving C-19, Hunter Biden, right? The FBI, I think it was Mark Zuckerberg who came out himself and pretty much confirmed that the FBI told him to squash that story regarding Hunter Biden back during 2019, 2020. So who's right now censoring people? It's not the right. It's not the right. When we look at history and we look at communistic countries, who are the ones that censor people? It's never freedom-loving people. It's always those types of dictators, like in North Korea right now. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was last year in 2021. There was a big protest in Cuba where the Cuban people were trying to rise up against the tyranny of the Cuban government, and what happened? The government shut down the internet so that images wouldn't get out. It's basically the same playbook that Venezuela did a couple of years back. And that's exactly what these dictators do. They censor, they stop transmitting in order to squash public support. Really, that's really what it was. And I remember talking to a niece of mine, and I told her, because she asked me what were my views and my opinions on it. I said, listen, short of military action, ain't nothing going to change in Cuba, right? It's really nice to see people standing up, but I mean, what's going to change at the end of the day? They don't have the support that they need, and the Cuban government is just going to squash everything. They're going to call in their buddies from Russia, their buddies from Venezuela, their buddies from Iran. They're going to come in and start shooting people and arresting people, and people go missing. And it's pretty much exactly what happened. So again, is the right censoring? No, right? Is the right taking away anybody's constitutional rights or infringing upon it? No, right? We believe in the Second Amendment. Right? We believe in freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. Now, some people may criticize the right and say, well, you guys are always talking about fake news. And I've heard that argument where, by going against the media, you are going against, the first, your first constitutional right of freedom of the press. No, listen, freedom of the press is not propaganda. That's not what it was meant for. Freedom of the press was to prevent the government from corruption, right? They were there, I shouldn't say prevent, but they were there to expose government corruption. They were supposed to be, the press was supposed to be for the people, not for the elitists, right? When you see things going strange from the left, like the Hunter Biden situation, it's the media's job to expose it, to ask questions, to dig deeper, and to do an actual investigation, to hold these people accountable as best they can and expose their corruption. And that's not what they're doing, right? And I've seen from CNN propaganda for Chinese propaganda on their station a couple of years back. So it's absolutely disgusting. Now, what about voter rights? We've talked about how they're trying to use the voter rights as an argument of us trying to take away their constitutional right to vote. Okay, we're not taking away anybody's right to vote. What we want is legitimate voting based on the law. If you are an illegal immigrant, you are not a legitimate voter. You are not a voter, period, right? You're only allowed one vote. So if you're voting multiple times, no, right? You are only supposed to vote in the area and the district that you are registered to. So if you go to another state and you're trying to vote on your state and in another state, etc., wrong. We want legal voting. We want voting for whatever the law is determined between whatever time and so on and so forth within reason, right? Because, I mean, there's certain states that allow you to vote or allow votes to come in like almost a week past voting day. That's absurd. But nonetheless, that's part of the law. It is what it is. That's fine. So on and so forth. So we're not trying to take away anybody's right to vote. Again, if you are an illegal immigrant, you don't have the right to vote. And that's been very clear with the Supreme Court. Recently, right, Roe versus Wade has been a talking point on that subversion of rights, right? The Republicans want to take away your right to women's health care and your right to choose and so on and so forth. Listen, what the Supreme Court did was give it back to the states. Your elected officials through the democratic process that got elected are the ones who are going to put it into place how they want to regulate abortion on a state-by-state level. Again, nobody's banning or making abortion illegal on a general whole. You have certain restrictions, you have exceptions, right? For the vast majority, a lot of these places will have exceptions. And listen, if they don't, then you know what? That's how that state chooses. Guess what? Next time it comes around, vote differently. That's part of the process. Nobody's taking away that right. Now, what about, now let me ask you this. Which side is using the DOJ, the CIA, the IRS, law enforcement to target their political parties? Is it the right? No, it's obviously the left, right? We've been called extremists. Parents who were fighting against CRT, the DOJ was sicked on them. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the FBI. FBI has raided the former president. The FBI has targeted multiple colleagues and connections with Donald Trump on the right. Let's look at Roger Stone, how he was treated just a couple years back. Michael Flynn, how was he treated a couple years back, right? We've got all these examples of the DOJ being weaponized against political opponents, and I'm not a fan of that in either direction. Let me tell you something, and I think I've mentioned this before on my channel. My great-grandfather in Cuba was arrested. He was in prison for 3 years for going against the Cuban regime. He didn't commit any violence. All he did was protest against it, and he was jailed for it. And so I am utterly against using law enforcement as a weapon for any political party. And this current administration is doing the exact same thing that the Obama administration did, only on steroids. Who do you think the IRS is going to target once they get into scale based on the last bill that was passed, right? I think 87,000 new agents are going to be hired. They're not going to be hired to go after the rich and the elites. They're going to go after where they can get the most bang for their buck, a return on their investment, if you will, and that's going to be majority middle class. Weren't there reports that the IRS targeted conservatives and journalists back during the Obama administration? Again, this is Obama 2.0 on steroids, in my opinion. Here's the actual concern that I do have when it comes to democracy, and it's exactly what took place on the Funny Business 2 years ago. Now, we've been called extremists. Kari Lake was called an election denier for questioning anything. Listen, we're questioning the legitimacy, same way that the Democrats did. I played a montage of videos of the Democrats questioning the integrity of the elections since 2000 or 2001 or something like that, right? During Bush Jr.'s time, right? It's been video after video, prominent Democrat after prominent Democrat questioning it. So why is it bad? Do we get censored when we question it? Again, the censorship, right? It's absolutely absurd. When have you ever seen a question be censored? It's just basically a legitimate question. Can we have fair elections? Did something phony happen 2 years ago? Can we have an audit to give us reassurance that there was no phony business? I don't want a recount. I want an actual audit. But people are refusing, and I'm really, really upset at Republicans like Kemp from the governor of Atlanta that did not actually do an audit, right? But anyhow, here's a video of, let's play this, and I'm going to break this down piece by piece, of Joe Biden and a speech that he gave not too long ago.
History and common sense tell us that liberty, opportunity, and justice thrive in a democracy, not in an autocracy. At our best, America is not a zero-sum society where for you to succeed, someone else has to fail. I promise America is big enough. It's big enough for everyone to succeed.
First of all, nobody here in America wants anybody to fail. That's absolutely absurd for him to even state that. We all want everybody to succeed. The reality is not everybody's going to succeed because of, in some cases, personal decisions, right? If I decide that I don't want to work a 9-to-5 job and I'd rather go out to the beach all day long and surf and play and then go out in the street and ask for money so I can eat, is that not a choice, right? And you could tell me, well, who chooses that? There are people that actually do choose that. I don't know what the percentage is, but that's what it is. I can't help the fact that there are people that instead of paying their bills on time or saving are out there spending money recklessly, right? A lot of people do get into credit card debt. There are some people that gamble their money away. I had a neighbor that I grew up with 15 years. And the daughter of this neighbor, who was like, we were 19 days apart. We grew up kind of like brother and sister when we lived together. She had confessed to me that her father had a gambling problem and gambled away her wedding money. Like, they had money saved up for her wedding, and when it was time to pay the church for the services, he actually went that day to the racetracks and gambled that money away. From what she had told me, they lost their house due to her father's gambling issues. So if this man ends up in the street asking for money, whose fault is that? Is that not a self-inflicted wound? If I choose to get addicted to drugs, if I start taking drugs, and unfortunately I get addicted to drugs, and I start spending my money on those drugs, is that not a self-inflicted wound? I mean, come on. You know, again, poverty has existed since, my gosh, since we have recorded history, right? Unfortunately, you have those that have, and you have those that don't have, and so on and so forth, and it's the reality. Specifically in our country, right? In some cases, it is an issue with, chance. Sometimes it's bad luck. Sometimes, man, you got hit with something. Those are out of your control circumstances, and I get those, and I'm not ragging on those people. But let's face the reality. There are some people where it is a self-inflicted wound. So again, I don't know what he's trying to say here, but let's keep going forward.
Every generation opening the door of opportunity just a little bit wider. Every generation, including those who've been excluded before. We believe we should leave no one behind because each one of us is a child of God. And every person is sacred. If that's true, then every person's rights must be sacred as well. Individual dignity.
I love how the Democratic Party loves to invoke God whenever they see fit. They don't follow God. They don't do things to support Christian values. They're always attacking Christians. It's very clear when it comes to abortion rights, right? The word abortion is not in the Bible because that practice did not exist. But when you look at specific verses that talk about children, right, it's very clear to see that God would take a stance against it. For example, when he says, I was the one who formed you within your mother's womb, right? If God is the one that's forming us within the womb, how can you possibly interrupt that formation and kill the child, right? A verse that says, I knew you before you were conceived, right? So God already knew us before we were conceived, and so he's the one who made us, right? Even though there's this genetic process that goes on, he knew us and he formed us. It's very clear. Not only that, but he also talks about how every child is a blessing from God. So by you aborting your child, you're getting rid of a blessing from God. I mean, how do you come up to a different conclusion? As a matter of fact, there was a tribe in the Old Testament. I forget what the name of the tribe is, but what they did is they would do child sacrifices, and they would heat up the hands of a statue of their lowercase g God. And what they would do is put the baby on the hands of this God, and the baby would die, obviously get burnt up. And they would do that as a child sacrifice, unfortunately. And God was utterly against that. It very clearly states that. Now, you might split hairs and say, well, that's a baby that's born, obviously. They're born and unborn. Listen, there's no difference, unborn or born. It's the same thing. It's just a matter of the location, the formation, etc., etc. What the left has done is they've dehumanized the baby to just a clump of cells and so on and so forth. Heard that argument all throughout my entire life, as early as a teenager when I was an atheist, and it made no sense to me. I wasn't religious back then, or I wasn't a person of faith back then, I should say. And I was an atheist. I was very, very much into science, and that made no sense to me scientifically speaking. Why are we going into outer space looking for single-celled organisms and considering that life, but a multicellular one inside the stomach of a woman, the womb of a woman, is not considered life? That sounded like politics to me, and so on and so forth. But let's go ahead and keep going.
Individual dignity, individual worth, individual determination. That's America. That's democracy. And that's what we have to defend. Look, even as I speak here tonight, 27 million people have already cast their ballot in the midterm elections. Millions more will cast their ballots in the final days leading up to November the 8th. And for the first time, this is the first time since the national election of 2020. Once again, we're seeing record turnout all over the country. And that's good. We want Americans to vote. We want every American's voice to be heard. Now we have to move the process forward. We know that more and more ballots are cast in early voting or by mail in America. We know that many states don't start counting those ballots till after the polls close on November 8th. That means in some cases we won't know the winner of the election for a few days, until a few days after the election. It takes time to count all legitimate ballots.
So I want to stop right there because that's where my concern comes in. I get that he's saying that those mail-in ballots and you know, it's just the way the times are. That to me is a huge red flag. But so the fact that he's pointing this out is troublesome for me based on what took place 2 years ago. But I do appreciate, I will say this because I want to be fair and I want to be correct. I do like the fact that he pointed out legal and legitimate, right? That those two things are important. Are they legal and are they legitimate votes, which is exactly what we're trying to make sure happens during this election. That's exactly what we want, because we don't want illegitimate or illegal voting to be counted, right? And I think that was the argument that was attempted to be made 2 years ago, but we got squashed. But let's go ahead and continue.
In a legal and orderly manner. It's always been important for citizens in the democracy to be informed and engaged. Now it's important for citizens to be patient as well. That's how it's supposed to work. This is also the first election since the events of January 6th, when the armed, angry mob stormed the U.S. Capitol. I wish I could say the assault on our democracy had ended that day, but I cannot.
Hold on. I'm going to rewind this because I want to hear this again. I just picked up on something I hadn't heard of first.
I wish I could say the assault on our democracy. That's how it's supposed to work. This is also the first election since the events of January 6th, when the armed, angry mob stormed the U.S. Capitol.
That's a blatant lie. Nobody was armed. Nobody had a gun. Nobody shot anybody. The only person that got shot was Ashley Babbitt, and she got shot by Capitol Police, and she was unarmed. So that's a false statement right there.
I wish I could say the assault on our democracy had ended that day, but I cannot. As I stand here today, there are candidates running for every level of office in America, for governor, Congress, Attorney General, Secretary of State, who won't commit. They will not commit to accepting the results of election that they're running in. This is a path to chaos in America.
Listen, if there's funny business going on and you don't answer those funny bits, or you just tell people shut up, take it, we're going to censor you, don't ask questions, no, it is what it is. If you do that, you're going to actually add gasoline to that fire. And that's exactly what happened 2 years ago. We saw things that were very, very suspicious, very erroneous, things that didn't make sense, things that didn't add up. And instead of these people coming out and saying, listen, we get it, it looks bad optically, let's calm down, we're going to provide you information, we're going to provide you actual transparency, we're going to do an audit so that way everybody is secure. That's not what took place. Again, they're still censoring you. You can't talk about it freely. You can't talk about the specifics that go on freely, right? In certain platforms. There's a number of things. Listen, when there's smoke, you don't just go, what's that smell? It must be nothing. Never mind. No, you get up and you investigate. What is that smoke? Where's it coming from? Is it bad? And so that's what happened 2 years ago. We smelled smoke, we saw it, and we were questioning it. And instead of them actually trying to give us peace of mind, they didn't. And by their actions, it just basically grew and grew and grew until it exploded. Let's keep going.
It's unprecedented. It's unlawful. And it's un-American. As I've said before, you can't love your country only when you win.
The party that supports kneeling on the flag, the party that supports burning the flag, the party that constantly talks about how bad America is because of slavery, the party that went on apology tours during the Obama administration and continues to apologize to this day, right? They're going to talk to us about not loving our country. We love our country. It's the reason why we're fighting so hard for it. It's the reason why we're doing what we're doing, is because we love. It's the reason why, listen, I'm recording right now and making my voice heard. It's because I love my country, right? And I don't just love it when I win, right? I love it regardless of the fact. I just don't like it when there's cheating going on, right? I don't like it because what happens is you have your constitutional right to vote. And if your vote is not being counted legitimately, then what good is it? I've said this before, maybe I haven't said it on this channel, but the illusion of democracy is not actual democracy. Okay? We cannot move forward in a country with the illusion that we have the right to vote, that our vote matters, that we have a say, that we, the people, are in charge of the direction of our country. Right? That's why the Constitution is there, because it's supposed to give power to the people and limit power of the government. And so when these people do the stuff that they did, the questionable things that they did, it prompts questions. And if those questions aren't answered and you're forced to just accept it and shut up about it, it's bad. It looks bad, right?
This is no ordinary year. So I ask you to think long and hard about the moment we're in. In a typical year, we're often not faced with questions of whether the vote we cast will preserve democracy or put us at risk. But this year we are. This year, I hope you'll make the future of our democracy an important part of your decision to vote and how you vote. I hope you'll ask a simple question of each candidate you might vote for. Will that person accept the legitimate will of the American people, of the people voting in his district or her district? Will that person accept the outcome of the election, win or lose? The answer to that question is vital. And in my opinion, it should be decisive. On the answer to that question hangs the future of the country we love so much and the fate of the democracy that has made so much possible for us.
I'm going to stop it right there. Do you see all the fear mongering that's going on? As long as, if they accept the results, it's good. Don't question the results. If anything should happen that is questionable, don't question it. Just accept it. Why? Why do we have to accept it? We have a process. We have steps. If things are within a certain margin, you are able to contest that. You're able to request a recount, right? If you see phony baloney stuff, you have every right to question it and demand for transparency. You have that right. We as people, this isn't a communistic country where you have to do whatever the government says. Come on. Here's the funny business that's going on. It's already popping up. I don't know how legitimate this is. It's just, I don't like to do fresh off the press type news because I like to wait to see how time evolves, to see what's the breakdown, what's truthful, what's not truthful, what comes out. But I'm going to break my usual tradition today to show you some of the reports that are coming up. So let's take a look at this real quick. Here we've got a video, an article, excuse me. Voters told voting machines are not working in Maricopa County, Arizona. Now, this is pretty interesting. We actually have a video from someone who's standing online. So I don't know if me playing this video will cause this this video to get censored, get taken down. But I'm gonna gamble it. If anything, I'll revise it and we'll see it down the road. But we can take a look right here. Let's see what it says.
That it reads and everything is fine.
Can you repeat that?
I can promise you.
Can you start from the beginning and repeat that?
So what happens is we have two tabulators. One of the tabulators is not working, okay? The other tabulator is taking about 75% successful. So 25% of them are being misread, and it could be a printer issue, or it could be the tabulator itself. So when it's misread, you have an option to put it into what's called box 3, and it gets read, whether it goes downtown and gets read manually, or whether it gets refed into our tabulator.
We don't want to adjudicate.
You get read, okay? So no one's trying to deceive anybody.
Of course not. Not on election day. That would never happen, right? No, that would never happen.
So choices are, you know, you guys. Sure.
If I get up there and that happens to my ballot, can I take my ballot with me and go somewhere else?
Not legally premises with the ballot. Sorry, there's not like a
Because I don't trust you going to box may never make
No, no way.
all the time.
The choice is,
I'll come back.
the choice is to wait until.
So that's coming out of Arizona. Again, I'm not making any false claims or false accusations, but we're already starting to see reports saying that there are some issues happening in certain counties. Arizona is not the only one. New Jersey county machines are also having an issue. Let's take a look here. It says voting machines down an entire New Jersey county are down in an entire New Jersey county, officials say, right? So this looks like it's Mercer County, New Jersey. Tuesday morning, as voters arrived to cast their ballots in midterm elections, elections officials told News 12 New Jersey that a software issue caused problems in voting machines county-wide. Listen, folks, I mean, issues are going to happen, glitches, so on and so forth. I mean, come on. I'm based off of what happened 2 years ago. Should this really be happening at this point? Not only that, but does it cause people to have concern? I think so. We've had, how long? We've had months, weeks, days to prepare for this day, and we're having issues today. At this point, it shouldn't. We really shouldn't. It should have been tested yesterday somehow, I think. I don't know if they did. If they didn't, I don't know. But based on everything that happened 2 years ago, every attempt should be made to make sure that there is no doubt in anyone's mind. If somebody accused me of cheating, I'm going to make sure that I prove that I didn't, that I won fair and square, so that my name can be cleared of any wrongdoing. Democrats don't seem to have that same concern. They're more like, you accept it, shut up about it, and you're going to like it. And if you don't, we're taking you down one way or another. So I don't know. When we talk about democracy being on the line and the fear-mongering that's going on, who's the one that's promoting these types of dictatorship type things? Who's the side that is going to... Who was giving a speech on September 1st behind a blood red colored background with Marines behind them? Wasn't Republicans. The ominous view the ominous feeling that gave was very, very much, I don't know. You want to relate it to Nazi Germany? You want to relate it to, I don't know. I relate it to kind of Star Wars, Emperor Palpatine or Emperor Snoke, right? From the Star Wars movies. You see that bloodshot red. You see this guy standing there and two dark figures over his shoulder. Come on. It doesn't portray happiness to me. It doesn't portray unity. It doesn't portray freedom. It doesn't portray liberty. It doesn't portray anything that this country actually stands for. It was very tyrannical, very scary, very demonic, in my opinion. So, guys, there you have it. Please go out today and cast your votes. Do whatever you can. If you need to leave early from work, please do so. Do it carefully. Obviously, don't rush, and be safe. Don't let anybody intimidate you. If you see anything phony, please post it. So that way it adds to the transparency, because if we wait for some officials, especially in blue counties, I fear that they may never report anything or hide as much as possible. That's my fear. That's my personal concern. But guys, we've got to make it. We've got to make a choice here. I don't think this is going to fix our country, but hopefully it'll stop the bleeding if we can take back the House and hopefully take back the Senate, and hopefully these Republican leaders will do good and begin holding people accountable. That's what we really need. We need people held accountable. We need transparency. We need we need fairness in our justice system. We need fairness in our country. We need to get back to basics. We need to start implementing what the Trump administration did that works so good for our economy. So guys, thank you so much for joining. Until next time, God bless. Peace out. And let's go MAGA, let's go America, let's go Brandon, and hopefully that red wave comes on through and crashes and really just destroys the Democratic Party. where they've been talking about the wrong types of things all along. They've been ignoring people suffering with the economy, the high inflation, and so on and so forth. And I hope it comes back to bite them tonight.